Okay, class, I apologize. My voice is I'm kind of losing it, but I wanted to go ahead and get y'all a video before your project is due in case you are not sure how to do an independent samples t-test using SPSS, because you're definitely going to have one of those questions where you have to do that. So with the example that was provided, I'm going to show y'all how to actually enter the data, as well as how to run the independent samples t-test. First thing is, let's enter the data. So if you look at the post that I made, realize that we're going to be comparing two groups of first graders on, it looks like we're comparing them on their IQ, some scores, and we have two different groups. We have an experimental group and a comparison group. So I am going to just type, well, first of all, I've got to go to variable view down here at the bottom to enter the data. And what we have is, we first of all need to type in the grouping variable, which would determine what group the particular person or subject is going to be in. So I'm just going to actually call it the group variable. And I'm going to then take my mouse, after I click on that, click my mouse in the second thing, and you'll notice it auto populates. And the main thing is, since the scores are all whole numbers, the only cells that I really need to worry about filling in are the decimals. I'm going to drop that down to 0 because none of the numbers include any decimal places. They're all whole numbers. Then I'm going to go to the label cell and type group again, same name as I called it. But then I need to click in the values column. And since there are two groups, I'm going to click on these little three dots, and it's going to ask for labels for the groups. So I am going to call value 1, and I'm going to call that label the experimental group. And I'm going to click add. Then I'm going to go back and give value 2 to the comparison group. And you'll see, if you look at the post, you'll see that these are the names of the two groups. And we're doing an independent samples t-test because these are two groups made up of different children in each group. They're not related groups. They're different, totally independent groups of students in each group. Click add and add that, and then click OK, since I only have the two groups. And the only other thing, actually I can leave in, go down here to measure, and I'm going to put nominal because it's a qualitative variable, the names of the group. They are names of groups. They are not numbers. But then the numbers that I'm going to be comparing are actual, I think there's some sort of IQ scores. So, so I'm going to go ahead now and put in a new variable called scores. And that is going to be my quantitative variable. Again, click my mouse in the second cell so that it auto-populates everything. Come down here, move this down to 0. And in this case, I don't need any labels or anything because they're not separate groups. They're just going to be numbers that I type in. So the only other thing I really need to change is down here in the level of measurement column right here. I'm going to put it on scale. Anytime you have a quantitative variable, you just put it on scale. And so that's it for entering the variables for the independent samples t-test. I'm then going to click on data view down here, the tab down here, so that it's ready for me to enter my group names and my scores. Well, it looks like, let's see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I've got 20 scores for each group. So I'm going to go ahead and just type 21s down this column for group 1, because there were 20 people, 20 students who were in this first group. And remember, the first group was the experimental group. Oops. So type in 21s, and then type in 22s for the comparison group. So I'll go all the way down to number 40 with my 2s. And that makes up my 20 in each group. Okay, now I scroll back up because now I'm going to be entering the scores. So since group number 1 was my experimental group, if you go look at the data that I included in my post, these are going to be the numbers that you see that go straight down that column. And you know, for your project, the data is going to already be provided for you. You just have to know how to enter it in SPS like I'm showing you, as well as then run the particular types of tests. So I'm just trying to get all these videos made. So if you were not able to follow the tutorials throughout the course, that hopefully this will help you be able to do your project successfully, since it's a heavily weighted project. Oops. All right, so that is all the numbers in the experimental group. Now I shift over to the second column and notice it's lined up here with group 2 now, which makes sense. I'm now moving over to the comparison group, and these are the numbers in the comparison group. All right, and that's it. Okay, so that's entering the data for an independent samples t-test. Okay, the next thing is, okay, how do we run the actual independent samples t-test and get the t-test output with the test statistic and the p-value, because you need those values in order to be able to make your conclusions. And you'll totally follow the sample project I gave you. It will tell you exactly how to set up your hypotheses and how to interpret your conclusions. So what I'm going to do to run the independent samples t-test is go up here to Analyze, go down to Compare Means, and then click on the independent samples t-test. It's asking me for my test variable, and that means your quantitative variable that you're comparing the means for. So that's scores. So I'm going to highlight scores, move it over to the test variable box, and my grouping variable was the variable that was, you know, the qualitative variable, whether somebody was in the experimental group or the comparison group. So I click on group and now move it to the grouping variable box down here, and then I have to define my groups. Group 1, I used the number 1 to specify that group, and group 2, I used the number 2 to specify that group. I made it easy because it already corresponds to the numbers group 1 and group 2. Then I click continue, and then I don't really need, if I clicked on options, honestly, we don't really need any of this stuff. So I don't need that. All I'm ready to do is just click OK. It's really that easy to get your output. And so what you're going to want to do, here are the group means right here. Notice the experimental mean is definitely higher than the comparison mean, but we do not know if it's significantly higher until we come down here and look at our test statistic, which is 3.534, and then look at our significance. The significance column that you see right here is my p-value column. So really the main cells that you're going to need to look at and include in your write-up, in your conclusion, is the test statistic of 3.534 on this top row, and the p-value is this 0.001. Well, y'all, that's a very low p-value. When you compare it to 0.05, you realize that your p-value is low, and when your p-value is low like this, then you reject the null. So you will reject the null hypothesis, and you will conclude that there is a significant difference between your two groups. So that is how you get your SPSS output using the, for the independent samples t-test. So that quick and easy. The longer part is just going to be entering the data, but that's all you need to do. So hopefully that is helpful for you.